Shall we jump in? Y'all ready? Proverbs 2, if you have your Bibles. Proverbs chapter 2. I want to read this to you. The title of my message today is Until Christ is Formed in You. It's going to make a lot more sense when we get to the end, but until Christ is formed in you is what I want to talk about this morning. And what I want to do is look at Proverbs chapter 2 is actually a letter that Solomon, King Solomon, if you know him, he was the wisest king to ever live. If you remember, he had one prayer that he prayed, and he prayed and asked God for wisdom. And so a lot of the book of Proverbs has actually come from King Solomon. And it gives us a lot of nuggets. If you've ever read the book of Proverbs, there's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, so you can read a proverb a day for an entire month, and you'll have read through the entire book. You could just repeat that over and over and over again throughout the course of the year. It doesn't take very long. And I'm telling you, you'll find all kinds of nuggets of wisdom all throughout the book of Proverbs. And so I've been actually reading the book of Proverbs in anticipation of this series that we're talking about, and I've just been going through it and highlighting and underlining all the different verses that pertain to family and how it helps us to as parents to be parents that God's called us to be, or be the spouses, the husbands and wives that God's called us to be, to learn how to handle money in the way that God's called us to handle it, and the way that He's called us to deal with things like communication and conflict and all this really practical stuff that we deal with day in and day out, particularly within the family unit. And so what we're going to do is we kind of talk about family over the next few weeks. We're going to do so by looking at the book of Proverbs. And the way that we want to do it this morning is starting in Proverbs chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Again, this is a letter that King Solomon, is writing to his son. And this is what it says. So you can imagine, if you're a father in here, you can imagine the advice or the wisdom that you try to give your kids, your sons, your daughters, right? And this is what he's saying. He said, "My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding." So he's like, look, listen to what I'm telling you. If you receive my words, this is what it is that you should do. If you treasure anything that I'm telling you, as your father, if I could give you any piece of advice, this is the advice that I would give to you. Make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. So he's talking to his son about praying, isn't he? He's saying, look, if you seek God, if you seek wisdom, if you seek what's above, then God will give you wisdom and understanding and knowledge, and he'll help you in all of these ways. It's really beautiful what Solomon's telling to his son here. Then you'll understand, verse 5, the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He's a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, every good path. We'll stop there. You can continue reading that whole chapter. It's a letter, again, from Solomon to his son, and I love how practical it is. I love the things that Solomon is telling him. Is like, look, once you fill your life and your heart with the knowledge of God and the wisdom of God and understanding God's ways, he said, man, all of a sudden you're going to walk in and understand justice and righteousness and treat people with equity and treat them fairly, and you'll have a good path for your life. That is good, solid advice from a father to his son. He's like, look, do the right thing. Keep following God, and all will be well with you. We do good just to know that right there. It's like, this is a great little letter. But as I was thinking about this very thing, I thought, man, how many times do we find ourselves, just like Solomon, trying to give advice to maybe our kids or family members or even close friends? You don't have to be a parent, but it could be a friend. But you see people in your life that maybe they're not going down the right path, or you know that, man, it's like, man, if they would just get it, they would just understand what's in them, the potential that God's given them, and the things that he's placed in their heart, man, they could change the world. They could do so much more than what it is that they're currently doing if they could just get past the fear, or just get past the struggle that they're dealing with, or just get past the thing that they're going through. And I couldn't help but read this letter from Solomon to his son and think that that's probably what Solomon was thinking. He's like, man, I want to help my son grow to be more like Jesus, right? I want to help my son grow in the ways of God, and I want to impart to him anything and everything I can to help him be the man of God that he was created to be. That's what Solomon was, I think, thinking when he was writing this letter. And I know as parents in this room, that's what you feel. That's what I feel about our kids. It's like, I want to do everything that I can that's in me to help raise Tucker, to help raise Piper, to be the people that God has called them to be. That's our call as a parent. It's also our call as a friend, as a follower of Jesus, that we bring others along with us, sharing and demonstrating the gospel in all of these ways. I remember a lot of y'all know I was a youth pastor for almost 10 or a little over 10 years. And in doing so, I obviously met a lot of different teenagers, navigated life in a lot of different ways with a lot of different kids. And it's cool because even to this day, like different people that were in different youth ministries that I was a part of, they'll still reach out to me and they'll want to grab lunch, or they'll want to just talk, or they'll be going through something and they'll call me, or they'll reach out and just need some encouragement or trying to navigate life, and they'll still call me. It's really, really cool. Well, about a year or two ago, one of them did just that. They reached out and they said, hey, I know it's been a while, but can we go to lunch? This was a guy that was in one of my youth ministries when he was in like junior high, so 13, 14 years old. Now he's in like mid-20s when he reached out to me. And we had stayed in like loose contact through Facebook and texting her once in a while. But he reached out and he said, hey, can we go to lunch sometime? I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go grab lunch. So we went, we met up at Los Cabos, right over here. And we went and we were eating lunch, and he said, hey, so I owe you an apology. And I said, no, you don't. What do you owe me an apology about? He said, well, you never knew this, but you've poured into me for a long time, and you've tried to help me, and you've, reached out to me, and we've gotten together a few times, and all of this. And he said, but I have to be honest with you. He said, I've been struggling with alcoholism for almost 10 years at this point, since I was a teenager. And he said, and it grabbed hold of my life in such a way that I didn't know how to get out of it. And he said, oftentimes you didn't know it, but times that we would meet or talk on the phone, or that you would call me, he said, I would be not in my right mind. I'd be on something, whether it be alcohol or pill or drug or whatever it may be. And he said, and I am going through this program, this 12-step program. And he said, one of the steps in that program is to contact people that made a difference in your life, and to reach out to them and to let them know the difference that they made. He said, and to apologize for the things that I hid, and the times that I lied to you, and the things that I had done. And it was a really beautiful conversation. It really was. That young man is still walking free. He is sober. He's been sober for years at this point, and is now helping others along the way. That I've been able to connect actually him with other people that have reached out to me, that are dealing with it currently. And I said, hey, you need to talk to this guy because he's walked it, he's lived it, and he can help you. And it's a really beautiful thing. But why do I say that? Because growth is hard. If you have somebody in your life, you have a friend, a family member, maybe a child, a grandchild, and they're dealing with stuff, maybe even a spouse, and they're walking through areas in their life that you see so much potential in, but they just seem stuck or bound up in this one way of thinking, or this one habit, or this one lifestyle choice. And it's hard to watch, and it's hard to see from the outskirts looking in. And you're like, man, if you only knew the potential that I see in you, if you only knew what God has placed in you, you could rise above all of that stuff, and you could be a person of leadership and of influence, and you have no idea the doors that would open for you. Anybody know anybody like that? Like, don't look around, right? But you know what I'm saying? Like, you're just like, if you would just get it. And you want to like just shake them, or you want to like just wake them up, or just do something to get their attention. Because it's just like something is missing in this way that we're trying to communicate. So if you felt that way, if you feel that way, as I'm talking, you picture someone in your life, again, don't look around, but if you picture anyone that may be in that situation, well, the good news is you're in good company, because Scripture is filled with people in that exact situation. Scripture is filled with people who, without the grace of God and the guidance of others, pouring into them, encouraging them, challenging them, holding them accountable, that they would be way over in left field as well. David wouldn't be king without a Nathan in his life calling out the sin that he had and helping him to be just the way that God had called him to be. Solomon, we just read instructions to his very son of, this is how you live for God. You think about Peter. Where would Peter be without Jesus continuing to reach out to him, to continuing to restore him, and to be that person in his life who refused to give up on him? I mean, Peter would have ended up, in prison, killed? He'd have been way off, but Jesus refused to let him go. So we see it time and time again of people, just like you and I, that fell so short as we do. We fall short too often. And who it is that we're called to be and what it is that God's called us to do. And so what I want to do this morning is, if you maybe have somebody like that in your life, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a child, a grandchild, whoever it may be, a friend, man, there's some encouragement that I want to share with you this morning. And it actually comes from the book of Galatians, in Galatians chapter 4, that Paul actually lays out this tension of, like, what do we do when we see that someone could be so much more than they currently are? We see the potential in somebody, and it just seems to be lying dormant, or maybe even wasted by bad choices or bad decisions, or going off the wrong path, or a relationship that is toxic, whatever it may be. It's like, what do we do? Like, how can I help that person? Because just standing on the sidelines seems so difficult. Well, Paul, writing to the letter to the church in Galatians, actually felt the same way. Look at Galatians 4, verse 19. He says this. He says, "My little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I could be present with you now and change my tone, for I am perplexed about you." In other words, Paul was kind of at the end of his rope with the church in Galatia. He was kind of like, he's like, look, guys, here's the deal. I've presented the gospel to you. You've given your life to Christ, and yet you've got all of these things that are still going on in your life, and it doesn't seem like you're like growing, or it doesn't seem like you're like doing anything. And so for Paul, he's looking from the outskirts, looking in at this church, and he says, you have so much in you. You have so much potential, so much that God wants to tap into, so many things that you have. But if you read the Galatians, the church had kind of gotten off. They had kind of taken some missteps theologically. Their lifestyle wasn't one that was really projecting the way as a follower of a Christ their lifestyle would. And so Paul was like getting kind of frustrated with this church, saying, look, guys, you know what to do. You're just not doing it. Anybody been there? You're like, you know what to do. Like, I raised you. You're just not doing it. Paul felt the same way, and he equates the anguish that he feels trying to help navigate this church's journey towards Christ. He equates the anguish that he feels to that of childbirth. Now, I don't know how Paul knows anything about childbirth, but I think we can all adequately assume that Paul is saying that the anguish that I feel, the hurt, the pain that I feel, seeing the choices and the decisions and the things that you're doing that are wrecking your life and destroying you from the inside out, the things that you're doing and the path that you're walking. And we deal with this in families. If this doesn't describe the pain of a parent, I don't know what does. That those decisions aren't an isolated choice, are they? Because when we make decisions and we're part of a family, and you start looking at that, you're like, oh my goodness, I feel that too. Because I love you so much. And I see the potential that's in you. And I think that's the very point that Paul's trying to make, because when he equates it to childbirth, when you think about that, what he's equating it to is a shared experience, isn't it? That you don't go through childbirth like in this place of completely by yourself, right? It's the mom and the baby. You're both experiencing it. And so Paul is saying, look, this anguish is the same way that we experience this pain, this enduring, this suffering almost together, because I'm not giving up on you. So what I want you to see is just, if you're in this season right now that I'm talking about, because I know it's kind of quiet in here right now, but if you find yourself in this place, just remember you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling the way that you feel about the people in your life that you deeply love, and you want to see them go in a direction that honors God, and seeing them in the right place. And I know it's exhausting. I know it's frustrating. I know it's difficult. You pray for wisdom. You pray for breakthrough. You feel like, I don't know what to do anymore. And remember that verse that we just read, Galatians 4:19. I'm in the anguish of childbirth until when? Until Christ is formed in you. Don't you want to see Christ formed in your family, in your loved ones, in your children, in your grandchildren? He says, look, Paul says, look, I understand that until Christ is formed with you, I'm going to endure this pain with you. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to just let you walk that path and stop praying or stop believing that things are going to turn around one day and stop believing that God is able. No, Paul says, I'm going to keep standing and praying and encouraging and exhorting and challenging and being there until I see Christ formed in your heart and reflected in your life. That's what he says. He says, I am in anguish right now, and until I see Christ formed in you, I'm going to stay right there next to you. It's a really, really beautiful thing, because one of the most humbling things you and I can really realize as parents, as teachers, as pastors, as friends, as coaches, is that God wants to use us as a means of forming Christ into our children, into our students, into our friends, into the people that are around us. And that's the call, really. The call as a parent is not to form your child into a little version of you, right? Like, the world has enough Chases. We don't need more Chases, right? The world has enough Stephanies. We don't need any more, you know? Like, I love Stephanie, but we only need one. We only need one. But he says, until Christ is formed in you. So many times it's easy to kind of project ourselves onto those around us and what we want them to do and our opinions of what they should do or not do. That's not the call. The call is Christ. Paul says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ, right? So he's not trying to get people to be like Paul. He's trying to get people to be like Christ. And it's an interesting thing, because if you think about what Paul's saying, and he says it in 1 Corinthians 11, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. That verse alone challenges me, because it challenges me to say, okay, can I say that with any level of integrity? That if you follow me, you'll become more like Jesus. If you live like I live, you'll become more like Jesus. If you do the things, if you spend your schedule, if you arrange your day, if you do the things and you treat people the way that I treat them, and you do the things that I'm doing, you'll become more like Jesus. That is a challenging thing to say. And that is a challenging way to live. And that's the call. As a parent, as a friend, as somebody that you so desperately want to see changed and so desperately want to see do different and make different choices and make different decisions, sometimes the first place we have to look is ourselves and say, wait, am I modeling the things I'm trying to tell them to do? Can they imitate me and get there? Because oftentimes So what do we do with all of this, right? Because I kind of want to break this down into a real kind of practical way of looking at this, because it's easy to say, like, okay, yeah, like we need to pour into people. We need to encourage people. We have people in our lives that are maybe walking down a path that we know is going to ultimately lead to destruction, but we've tried to help. We've tried to pour into them. We've tried to encourage them. We've tried to get there. Like, I just don't know what else I could possibly do. And like, we're going to keep praying for them. Like, we get all of that, right? Well, I love some of the letters to from Paul, because he actually breaks down his model for what he does in experiencing this kind of anguish of childbirth and watching and how to help someone until we start to see Christ formed in them. And he models it throughout his letters. If you read the book of Galatians, he models what he does through that, but in these different ways. But in 1 Thessalonians 2:8, he really breaks it down. His kind of what I would call his model of discipleship, his model of mentorship, where if you're somebody here and you're interested in, like, man, how do I disciple somebody? Like, how do I really help someone imitate me as I imitate Christ? Like, how do I get them there? Well, Paul breaks it down really, really well in this way. And this is what it says. 1 Thessalonians 2:8 says, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel, but of God. Not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves. Because you had become very dear to us. And then skip down to verse 11. For you know how, like a father with his own children, we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. So, in those three verses, Paul actually breaks down a model for discipling somebody else. Let me show it to you. This is what it says. So he starts with being affectionately desirous for you. Discipleship starts in caring about the other person. Like, caring about them, loving them right where they are. I love what the New Living Translation puts that, because he says, because we loved you so much. You don't get any more clear than that. Because we loved you so much, we shared the gospel with you. We shared ourselves with you. And then he goes on from there. Because we loved you so much. There's an old saying that you've probably heard, that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so many times what happens, I think, is people, and I think we do it really unintentionally, but I think sometimes what happens is people don't realize that we just love them right where they are. And it's a trap that's easy to fall into, that we can love someone for who we want them to be. We love them for who we think they should be. We love them for how we think they should act. And Paul says, no. I love you right where you're at. Because I love you so much, man, I share the gospel with you. The saving grace of Jesus Christ. That he died for you, gave his life for you. That you, if you believe in him, that you're now a child of God. That everything you need in life has already been bought and purchased and paid for you by the shed blood of Jesus Christ. That when you live your life for him, that then you find meaning and purpose, and you give your life, and he lives in you and you in him, and there's this relationship back and forth, and you will become the person that you are uniquely called and created and designed to be. That he's with you and he sticks by you closer than a brother, that you don't have to earn his love. You don't have to be anything other than what you were created to be, that he loves you right where you are. Amen. Just as you are. And we run to him just as we are. And I think that is where when you think about discipleship or helping someone in their journey towards Christ, it has to start with love. It has to start from a place of love and care in a genuine kind of way. So many times what we try to do is we just try to, we want to fix people, right? We want to fix them and tell them what to do before we sow any kind of relational seeds into their life, or before we get to know their journey or their story or really anything else. We want to just jump straight to the part that we get to tell them what to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't often work that way. That it starts from a place of love and knowing that we care about them. And that's where Paul starts. He says, because I loved you so much, because I'm affectionately desirous of you. Starts there. We were ready to do what? We're ready to not only share the gospel, but also ourselves. So the second part, and we can't forget about this, is just sharing the gospel. That we love people enough to tell them about Jesus, right? To tell them about what Jesus has done for us. So how do you bring this into your home? You create an atmosphere of the gospel in your house. Praying together. Doing devotions together. If you got young kids, it's hugely important. I love it nothing more than when Tucker or Piper walk in and catch Stephanie or I praying or reading the Bible together. Your kids should catch you doing those things. It's how you can share the gospel in your home in a very tangible, practical way. Praying together, praying over meals, spending time with one another, praying with your children, praying with your spouse, teaching them how to pray. One of my favorite things at night when we tuck our kids into bed is I'll pray over them and then I let them pray. They have the greatest prayers you've ever heard in your life. Piper's like blessing her every stuffed animal that she has. She's praying for every family member. Like she'll hold revival like right in her bedroom. I'm like, Piper, we got to go to bed at some point. You know, you've been praying for an hour and a half. You know what I mean? But like it's a beautiful thing. And we bring the gospel into our homes and we create an atmosphere that it's obvious that this house belongs to the Lord. This house belongs to God. Do people know that when they walk into our homes? Or is it filled more with kind of chaos and strife and resentment and bitterness and filled with a house with a bunch of people living there that never talk to each other? Or is it a place that imitating Christ is being modeled for every person that walks in our doors? As the head of our homes, as the parents, we're responsible for that atmosphere. You're responsible for that atmosphere that's in your home. And I promise you this, our kids are watching. It's amazing to me what our kids pick up on. I have young kids, y'all know, they're 7 and 5. And they're in that stage now that they mimic everything that happens. And it's funny because like we'll get caught sometimes, you know, and Piper the other day, Stephanie was driving down the road and somebody pulled out right in front of her. And Stephanie goes, oh, you dodo bird. And right in front of our kids. I know, terrible language in front of our kids. And, but it was funny because Piper, without skipping a beat, she goes, Mommy, we don't call people dodo birds. It's like, that's right, Piper, we don't. You're right. But I love it. They're like, and so they'll like call us out or like, Piper, she mimics Stephanie all the time. So we'll ask her to do something. And this last week, I was asking her to do something, or a couple weeks ago. And she goes, geez, I can't do a million things at once. I'm like, where have you heard that before? Yeah. Like, okay. So, but they watch everything that we do. And we're responsible for that. The greatest call that any of us could ever have is sharing ourselves, our own lives, like Paul did, with somebody else that says, follow me. And as a parent, that's exactly what we do. You may not say it that way, but that's what's happening. Imitate me, follow me. And as our kids do that, are they going to get closer to Jesus? Are they going to become more like him? By the way that we live, the way that we treat each other, the way that we talk, the way that we carry ourselves. Because this is what Paul does. He says, look, because I love you so much, I shared the gospel with you, and I shared myself with you. That's what he said. I share myself. It's the third thing. That if we're going to disciple people, we have to be willing to share ourselves with them. And so many times, it can be a hard thing, right? Especially with our kids, as parents, or even family and friends. Like, it can be kind of a difficult thing, but like, do our kids get to see ourselves? Do you ever apologize to your kids? Do they ever see you struggle with anything? Do you ever open up in any kind of way where they really get to know you? Do you celebrate wins together and really bring people to a part? Or is our homes more ran kind of as a, you just do what I say and don't ask questions kind of thing? That's not how Paul did it. I'm just saying. Paul, he said, I share myself. I bring my whole self to you so that you can know me and I can know you, and together we can know Christ as one. And again, we create this atmosphere in our homes in sharing ourselves with one another, spending time together. Letting our kids see us spend time together as husband and wife, right? Talking to each other, treating each other fairly and with kind words, and going on dates and doing fun activities with the kids and spending time with them individually, investing into their life, acting, even if you have to pretend, acting like you're interested in the other toy that they just got. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. I can't tell you how many things that I have to be interested in because my kids are interested in it. You know what I mean? And I don't get a choice. But I love that because I want to know them. And in sharing myself with them means, man, if you're into it, I'm into it too. If you like video games, I like video games too. If you want to play basketball, I like playing basketball too. Because that's in sharing ourselves, man, we're helping lead them to become the people that they're called to be. It's about living it and modeling it and bringing Christ into the center of our homes and in the center of our lives. And then finally, only after we've done these three things, I believe this is what Paul lays out for us very intentionally, but only after we've demonstrated that we love them so much, only after we've shared the gospel in the way that they understand the saving grace and power of Jesus Christ, only after we've shared ourselves do we get to verse 11 and 12 that says exhort, encourage, and urge. See, what happens, I think, is we want to skip the first three and jump right to exhorting, encouraging, and urging, which translates into telling other people what to do. But Paul says it doesn't work that way. You have to start from a place of love. Then you have to show them Jesus. Then you have to share your own self. Then you can give advice and tips and tell other people what it is that you think. That's what he says. Encourage, exhort. You know that word exhort, it means it's just a really, really strong word for encourage. So it's like, I'm going to set a high standard. I'm going to tell you, like, hey, this is where it is that God's called you to be. I'm going to show you, like, hey, that decision is going to lead to destruction. That relationship, like, it's not going to end well. That thing that you're doing, I'm telling you, I've seen it before. I've walked down this road. Like, I know you're acting like this is who you are, but I really know you. I've navigated life for you with 40 years, 30 years, 15 years, whatever it may be. I know who you are. I know what you can do. You're going down the wrong path. I'm telling you, this is the way that you can do it. It's going to go much better for you. That's exhorting. Showing them, hey, this is the way. But it doesn't stop there. You also have to encourage them on how to get there. You have to encourage them that they're able to actually live up to the standard that you're calling them to. Right? So many times we just try to, they're like, hey, you should do this. All right, see it. Okay? But what happens in Paul's model here, he says, no. You have to set the standard. You have to call them to be like Christ, but then you've got to encourage them along the way. That means when they fall down, you got to help them get back up. When you're getting frustrated because they're not changing fast enough, you got to keep encouraging them. When they're not seemingly listening to anything you're saying, that encouraging word is there every step of the way. He says, so I'm exhorting, I'm encouraging, and I'm urging you. This is where it comes in as parents. Like, I'm urging you. Some versions, some translations say, I'm pleading with you to live a life worthy of the call. This doesn't describe the life of a parent. I don't know what does. But really not just a parent, a friend, anybody in your life that you care about. This is the model. And Paul, giving us at the very end a word that I think preaches to us, but I think he said it because I think he was preaching to himself. Because in the same letter, in Galatians 6, verse 9, this is what he says. He says, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." See, so from the same letter that Paul's writing to this church and saying, look, guys, I am anguishing as if I was in childbirth until I see Christ formed in you, because I'm not seeing the evidence of any of the seeds, of any of the words, of any of the encouragement, of any of this stuff has taken root. He said, it pains me. But I've got this model that I'm going to keep loving you. I'm going to keep sharing the gospel with you. I'm going to keep pouring my life into you. I'm going to exhort you and encourage you and plead with you to live a life worthy of the life you were born to live, a life dedicated to Jesus Christ. And I think Paul realizes that's an exhausting thing to do sometimes, to keep sowing seed when we don't see anything taking root. And so his encouragement, just two chapters later, it's like, guys, we can't grow weary in doing good. We can't grow weary in doing good, because if we will just keep loving and keep pouring out and keep sharing the gospel and keep exhorting and keep encouraging and keep pleading, that we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. The word this morning, church, is that if you have friends, family, anybody in your life, and you're saying, God, I am going to keep standing in the gap until I see Christ being formed in them, even if I can't see it right now. Paul compares this to sowing seed. You say, I'm going to keep sowing seed into my kid. I'm going to keep sowing seed into my grandkid. I'm going to keep praying. I'm going to keep sharing the gospel. I'm going to keep challenging them. I'm going to keep encouraging them. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep showing them the way. I'm going to keep modeling it. I'm going to keep sharing with them. I'm going to keep going every single step, because I know every word and every phone call and every text message is a seed that I'm sowing into their life. And the word says that his word will not return void. And I know that as I sow these seeds, that even if I can't see it, that by faith they are taking root, and I will see this manifested in their life. And we keep showing up time and time and time again until Christ is formed in you. Friend, that is a lifetime call. Because the reality is, there's areas, and this may help you if you get frustrated sometimes, but the truth is, there's areas in all of our lives that we still need Christ to be formed. That's why it's easy to, as I'm even giving this message, to think about other people in our lives while neglecting our very selves, to say, God, where is Christ not formed in me yet? Where are the areas in my life that somebody may look at and be like, you're better than that. Knock that off. That's not what you're called to do. It's not how you're called to treat people. And we start to see ourselves as we are, understanding that without the gospel, without the grace of God, man, I'll get frustrated every time. I'll fall into selfishness every time. I'll fall into strife and anger and trying to control and trying to letting resentment creep in and bitterness creep in because they don't seem to be getting it and nothing seems to be working. And we get to this place that we find ourselves, and then all of a sudden we realize, wait a second. They need Jesus just like I need Jesus. My job is to keep loving them right where they are, because Christ loves me right where I am. And we model it and display it. And we receive it by faith. Galatians 2:20 says this, and I'll end here. Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. In the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me, until Christ is formed in you. Can the band come up? Would y'all stand?